The final phase of sniper training arrived like a storm that had been building on the horizon for months. Only 8 recruits remained from the original 50, and the tension in the barracks was thick enough to cut with a knife. Maria had survived every elimination round, every impossible test, every attempt to break her spirit, but she knew the hardest part was yet to come. Sergeant Johnson gathered the remaining candidates in the briefing room at 0500 hours on a cold Monday morning. The walls were covered with topographic maps, satellite photos, and target identification charts. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the faces of the exhausted soldiers. "Listen up," Johnson barked, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "For the next 2 weeks, you will participate in the final evaluation exercise. This is not a drill, not a simulation, not a game. This is as close to real combat conditions as we can create without actually shooting at you." He gestured to the maps behind him. "You will be divided into teams of 2 and deployed to different sectors in a 50-square-mile training area. Your mission will be to locate, identify, and eliminate high-value targets while avoiding capture by our opposition force, which consists of experienced rangers who know this terrain like their own backyard." Maria felt her heart rate increase, but her expression remained calm. Around her, she could see the other recruits shifting nervously in their seats. This was the moment they had all been training for, the final test that would determine who earned the right to call themselves a military sniper. "Each team will carry minimal supplies," Johnson continued. "You will live off the land, move only at night, and communicate only when absolutely necessary. If you are captured, you fail. If you miss your target, you fail. If you compromise your partner's position, you both fail." The sergeant's eyes swept across the group, lingering for a moment on Maria. "Some of you have been questioning whether certain individuals belong in this program. This exercise will provide definitive answers to those questions." The team assignments were announced, and Maria found herself paired with Thompson, a quiet soldier from Montana who had never openly criticized her, but had never supported her either. He was tall, experienced, and competent, but Maria could see in his eyes that he considered her a liability. "Wonderful," Thompson muttered under his breath as they left the briefing room. 2 weeks in the wilderness with Tiny Santos. This should be interesting. Maria decided to address the situation directly. "Look, Thompson, I know you don't want me as a partner, but we're stuck with each other. We can either work together and succeed, or we can fail separately. Your choice." Thompson studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But if you slow me down or get us caught, don't expect me to carry you." "I wouldn't ask you to," Maria replied. Their assigned sector was in the mountainous northern part of the training area, terrain that favored concealment, but made movement extremely difficult. The target dossiers they received contained photos and descriptions of 3 individuals who would be moving through their area over the course of the exercise, along with approximate timeframes and possible routes. The first target was scheduled to appear on day 3, the second on day 7, and the third on day 12. Between engagements, they would need to remain hidden, while opposition forces actively searched for them. It was a test of patience, skill, and mental toughness that broke many candidates. Maria and Thompson spent their first day studying the terrain and identifying potential shooting positions and escape routes. Maria's smaller size allowed her to access locations that would be impossible for Thompson to reach, while his greater strength enabled him to carry heavier equipment over longer distances. "You know," Thompson said as they established their first hide site, "you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Maria asked while camouflaging their position with natural vegetation. "Someone trying to prove how tough they are," Thompson admitted. "Instead, you just focus on the mission." "It's refreshing." The first target appeared exactly when intelligence had predicted. Maria and Thompson had been in position for 6 hours, motionless in the thick underbrush that concealed their shooting position. Through her scope, Maria could see a figure moving along the ridgeline 800 meters away. "Target acquired," she whispered into her radio. "Male, approximately 40 years old, wearing a blue jacket and carrying a brown backpack." "Confirmed," came the response from the evaluation team. "You are cleared to engage." Maria steadied her breathing and calculated the shot. The wind was gusting from the southwest at approximately 10 miles per hour, and the target was moving at a steady pace along a predictable path. She led the target slightly, accounting for both wind and movement, and gently squeezed the trigger. The simulated round found its mark perfectly. Through her scope, she could see the target reach up to touch the sensor that had been attached to his chest, indicating a successful hit. The man raised his hand in acknowledgement before disappearing back into the tree line. "Nice shot," Thompson said, genuine admiration in his voice. For the next 4 days, they moved carefully through their sector, avoiding the roving patrols that were searching for them. Maria's ability to squeeze into small hiding places proved invaluable when opposition forces passed within meters of their position. On 2 separate occasions, Thompson had to find alternative concealment, while Maria remained perfectly hidden in spaces too small for him to access. The second target proved more challenging. Intelligence reports were less specific, and the weather had turned stormy with heavy rain and fog that limited visibility to less than 200 meters. Maria and Thompson spent an entire day waiting in a position that turned out to be wrong, forcing them to relocate during daylight hours while avoiding detection. "This is hopeless," Thompson said as they huddled under a makeshift shelter during a particularly heavy downpour. "We can't see anything in this weather, and they could be anywhere." Maria studied their maps by the dim light of a red-filtered flashlight. "Not anywhere," she said finally. "Look at the terrain. If I were trying to move through this area in bad weather, there are only 3 routes that make sense. We need to position ourselves where those routes converge." Thompson looked at the map and slowly nodded. "You're right. There, at that saddle between the 2 hills. Anyone coming through this area would have to pass through there." They moved to the new position that night, despite the risk of traveling in darkness during a storm. The location Maria had identified offered excellent fields of fire in multiple directions, with natural concealment and good escape routes. It was, Thompson admitted, a better position than he would have chosen. The second target appeared at dawn on day 7, exactly where Maria had predicted. The shot was more difficult due to the distance and wind conditions, but Maria's calculation proved accurate. "Another successful engagement, another step closer to graduation. How did you know?" Thompson asked as they prepared to move to their next position. "My dad taught me to think like the enemy," Maria explained. "People are predictable. They take the path of least resistance, especially when they think no one is watching." As the exercise continued, Thompson's attitude toward Maria underwent a complete transformation. He began asking for her input on decisions, deferring to her expertise in camouflage and concealment, and openly acknowledging her contributions during their radio check-ins with the evaluation team. "I owe you an apology," he said one evening, as they shared a cold meal in their hide site. "I judged you based on your size instead of your abilities. That was wrong." "Apology accepted," Maria replied. "But save the congratulations until we finish this thing." The final target was the most difficult of all. According to their briefing, this individual would be actively trying to avoid detection, moving unpredictably and taking evasive measures. The engagement would require not just accurate shooting, but tactical thinking and adaptability. Maria and Thompson spent days tracking their target through the wilderness, following subtle signs and trying to predict where he would appear next. It was a deadly game of chess played across miles of hostile terrain, with their graduation hanging in the balance. When the moment finally came, Maria's shot had to be taken under the most challenging conditions imaginable. But as she lay behind her rifle, calculating windage and elevation with mathematical precision, she felt the same calm confidence that had carried her through months of training. The target was there, the shot was possible, and she was ready. The exercise would end with that single shot, but Maria's real test was just beginning. Maria Santos stood barely 5 feet tall in her military boots, but her eyes held the steady focus of someone who had never missed a target that mattered. At the Army's Advanced Sniper Training Facility in Fort Benning, she had become used to the whispers that followed her everywhere she went. "Look at Tiny Santos," the other recruits would say, not bothering to lower their voices. "She needs a stepladder just to see over the shooting bench." The comments stung, but Maria had learned long ago that proving herself required more than words. Growing up in a small Texas town, she had been the smallest kid in every class, every sport, every group photo. Her father, a retired Marine, had taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old, standing on wooden crates to reach the rifle rest at the local range. "Size doesn't pull the trigger, mija," he would tell her. "Your mind does. Your heart does. Everything else is just noise." Now, at 24, Maria was one of only 12 soldiers selected for the military's most elite sniper program. The training was brutal, designed to break even the strongest candidates. Out of the original 50 applicants, most had already quit or been dismissed. The remaining soldiers were all men, all significantly larger than Maria, and most of them seemed to think her presence was some kind of joke. Sergeant Johnson, the lead instructor, was a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks and a voice that could stop a charging bull. He had made it clear from day one that he didn't believe women belonged in combat roles, especially not in his program. Santos, he would bark during training exercises. "You sure you can handle that rifle? Maybe we should get you something smaller, like a paintball gun." The other recruits would laugh, but Maria never responded. Instead, she would quietly adjust her position, control her breathing, and place her shots exactly where they needed to go. Her accuracy scores were consistently among the highest in the class, but somehow that never seemed to matter to anyone except her. The training facility was located in a remote part of Georgia, surrounded by thick forests and rolling hills that provided perfect conditions for long-range shooting exercises. The days started before dawn and ended long after sunset, filled with physical conditioning, weapons maintenance, ballistics calculations, and endless hours on the shooting range. Maria's bunkmate was Private Rodriguez, a friendly guy from California who treated her with basic human decency, unlike most of the others. During their brief moments of downtime, he would share stories about his family back home and ask about hers. "You know they're all watching you, right?" Rodriguez said one evening as they cleaned their weapons. "Waiting for you to fail." "I know," Maria replied, carefully inspecting her rifle's barrel. "But I'm not going to give them that satisfaction." The physical requirements of the program were designed to push every candidate to their limits. Maria had to work twice as hard as everyone else just to meet the minimum standards for things like carrying heavy equipment over long distances or climbing rope obstacles. Her small frame meant she had to be more creative, more efficient, and more determined than her larger counterparts. During one particularly challenging exercise, the recruits had to carry full combat gear, including their rifles, ammunition, and survival equipment over a 15-mile course through difficult terrain. The march had to be completed within a specific time limit, or the candidate would be automatically dismissed from the program. Maria struggled with the weight of her pack, which represented a much larger percentage of her body weight than it did for the other soldiers. Halfway through the course, she was falling behind the group. Some of the other recruits began making bets about whether she would make it to the finish line. 20. "Buck says Tiny Santos quits before mile 10, one of them said loud enough for her to hear. "You're on," another replied. "I give her until mile 12 at most." Maria gritted her teeth and forced herself to maintain her pace. Her shoulders ached, her legs burned, and her lungs felt like they were on fire, but she refused to slow down. Step by step, mile by mile, she kept moving forward. When the finish line finally came into view, she was still within the time limit, though just barely. Sergeant Johnson was waiting at the end with his stopwatch and his usual scowl. "Santos," he said, checking his time. "You made it with 37 seconds to spare." "Yes, Sergeant," Maria replied, trying not to show how exhausted she was. "Don't expect any congratulations," Johnson continued. "In the real world, 37 seconds might as well be 37 years. The enemy won't give you extra time just because you're small." Despite the constant criticism and doubt from her instructors and fellow recruits, Maria continued to excel in the areas that mattered most for a sniper. Her shooting accuracy was exceptional, her patience was unlimited, and her ability to remain calm under pressure was remarkable. During simulation exercises where the recruits had to engage targets while under simulated enemy fire, Maria consistently outperformed soldiers who were twice her size. The program included extensive training in camouflage and concealment, skills that actually favored Maria's smaller stature. While the larger recruits struggled to hide their bulk in the dense Georgia vegetation, Maria could disappear into spaces that wouldn't accommodate her classmates. She learned to use her size as an advantage rather than a limitation. One afternoon during a field exercise, Maria found herself paired with Jackson, one of the most vocal critics of her presence in the program. They were tasked with establishing an observation post and maintaining surveillance on a mock enemy position for 6 hours without being detected. "Great," Jackson muttered as they gathered their equipment. Stuck with the mascot for the whole afternoon, Maria didn't respond to the insult. Instead, She studied the terrain carefully and identified a position that would provide excellent visibility while offering natural concealment. Jackson, meanwhile, chose a spot that looked impressive but would actually expose them to detection from multiple angles. "We should set up over there," Maria suggested, pointing to her chosen location. "Nobody asked you, Tiny," Jackson replied. "I've got this handled." 3 hours into the exercise, Jackson's position was discovered by the evaluators, resulting in a failed grade for both partners. Maria's suggested location, they later learned, would have provided perfect concealment for the entire duration of the exercise. As the weeks passed, the program became increasingly demanding. Recruits continued to drop out or get dismissed for failing to meet standards. The remaining candidates found themselves under even more intense scrutiny and pressure. Maria knew that every mistake she made would be magnified, every success diminished, but she pressed on regardless. Her determination was fueled by more than just personal pride. She carried with her the memory of her father's words and the knowledge that somewhere out there, soldiers' lives might one day depend on skills like hers. The thought of letting them down because she gave up was unacceptable to her. The training program was designed to identify not just skilled shooters, but soldiers who could perform under the most extreme conditions imaginable. As Maria lay in her bunk each night, exhausted but determined, she knew she was being forged into something stronger than she had ever been before. The question was whether that would be enough to overcome the prejudices and obstacles that seemed to multiply with each passing day. 6 months after graduation, Sergeant Maria Santos found herself assigned to Forward Operating Base Chapman in eastern Afghanistan, a dusty outpost surrounded by mountains that seemed to stretch endlessly into the hostile sky. The base was home to several hundred soldiers, including a small contingent of specialized sharpshooters who provided overwatch and precision fire support for various operations. Despite her exemplary performance during training, Maria quickly discovered that earning her sniper qualification had been only the beginning of her struggle for acceptance. The combat veterans at Chapman had their own opinions about who belonged in their ranks, and a small woman with a barely noticeable Texas accent wasn't what they had been expecting. Staff Sergeant Murphy, the leader of the sniper section, was a grizzled career soldier with 3 combat deployments and a collection of scars that told stories he rarely shared. When Maria reported for duty, he looked her up and down with the expression of someone examining a disappointing purchase. "So you're the famous Santos I've been hearing about," Murphy said, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "The one who thinks she can run with the big dogs." "I'm here to do whatever job you need me to do, Staff Sergeant," Maria replied, maintaining perfect military bearing despite the obvious hostility. "That's what they all say," Murphy muttered. "We'll see how you feel when the bullets start flying for real." The sniper section's operational tempo was intense. Almost every day brought new missions: convoy overwatch, patrol support, base security, and occasionally more specialized assignments that required surgical precision rather than overwhelming firepower. Maria found herself consistently assigned to the easier, lower-risk missions while the veteran snipers handled the more dangerous operations. "Safety first," Murphy would say when making assignments. "Can't have our little mascot getting hurt on the difficult missions." The other members of the section followed Murphy's lead. They were professional enough not to openly sabotage Maria's efforts, but they made it clear through countless small gestures that she was not considered an equal member of the team. Equipment went missing from her gear. Her shooting positions were consistently given lower priority during mission planning, and her tactical recommendations were dismissed without consideration. Private First Class Williams, a young soldier from Alabama who had arrived at Chapman just weeks before Maria, seemed to take particular pleasure in making her life difficult. During one memorable incident, he accidentally knocked over her carefully arranged ammunition while she was preparing for a mission, forcing her to recheck and recount every round while the patrol waited. "Oops," Williams said with a smirk. "Guess you'll have to be more careful about where you put your stuff, Tiny." Maria's frustration grew with each passing week, but she channeled it into her performance. She volunteered for extra duties, maintained her equipment to standards that exceeded regulation requirements, and spent her limited free time studying intelligence reports and tactical manuals. When she did receive opportunities to demonstrate her abilities, she made the most of them. During a routine convoy overwatch mission along Route Blue, a dangerous stretch of road that wound through a valley frequently targeted by insurgent attacks, Maria was positioned on a hilltop overlooking a 3-kilometer section of highway. Her job was to watch for potential threats and provide accurate intelligence to the convoy commander. The convoy consisted of 6 heavily armored vehicles carrying supplies to a remote EU outpost near the Pakistani border. Intelligence reports indicated a high probability of enemy contact along this particular route. But the mission was considered routine enough that Maria was deemed suitable for the assignment. From her concealed position among the rocks and scrub vegetation, Maria maintained constant surveillance of the road and surrounding terrain. Her spotter, Corporal Davis, was a competent soldier who treated her with professional courtesy if not warmth. Movement at 2 o'clock, Davis reported through their radio headset. Approximately 1,500 meters. Maria adjusted her scope and immediately identified the potential threat. 3 individuals were moving along a ridgeline that would give them an excellent firing position over the convoy route. Their movement patterns and equipment suggested they were not local civilians. Possible insurgent observation team, Maria reported to the convoy commander. 3 individuals armed moving to tactical positions overlooking your route. Copy that, Overwatch, came the reply. Continue surveillance and report any changes. For the next hour, Maria tracked the suspected insurgents as they established what appeared to be an ambush position. She provided detailed updates on their locations, movements, and activities, painting a clear picture of the developing threat for the convoy commander. When the convoy finally entered the danger area, the ambush unfolded exactly as Maria had predicted. The insurgents opened fire from the positions she had identified, but their advantage of surprise was lost because of her early warning. The convoy was able to take evasive action and return effective fire, neutralizing the threat with minimal damage. Outstanding work, Overwatch. The convoy commander radioed after the engagement ended. Your intelligence was spot on. You probably saved lives today. Back at base, however, Maria's contribution to the successful mission was largely overlooked. The official after-action report credited the convoy's success to good leadership and effective communication, with only a brief mention of the Overwatch team's performance. Not bad for a training mission, Murphy commented when Maria submitted her detailed intelligence report. Maybe next time we'll let you handle something with real consequences. The dismissive attitude continued for months. Maria performed her duties professionally and competently, but she remained an outsider in a tight-knit community that valued experience and proven performance under fire above all else. Her small victories were minimized, her mistakes magnified, and her presence treated as a social experiment. Rather than a military necessity, the situation reached a breaking point during a section meeting where mission assignments for the following week were being discussed. A particularly dangerous operation required a sniper team to provide overwatch for a special forces raid on a suspected bomb-making facility in a heavily defended area of the province. I'll take Johnson and Martinez, Murphy announced, referring to 2 of his most experienced soldiers. This one's going to be hairy and I need people I can count on. Maria had been hoping for the assignment. Her shooting scores were among the highest in the section. She had demonstrated excellent judgment during previous missions, and she was eager to prove herself in a more challenging environment. Staff Sergeant, she said, raising her hand, I'd like to volunteer for that mission. The room fell silent. Murphy stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. Negative, Santos. This isn't a job for someone who needs to prove a point. Lives are on the line. With respect, Staff Sergeant, my qualifications speak for themselves, Maria replied, maintaining her composure despite the public rejection. I've successfully completed every mission I've been assigned. Training missions, Williams interrupted with a laugh. Baby stuff compared to what the real snipers handle. That's enough, Murphy said, but his tone suggested he agreed with Williams' assessment. Santos, you're assigned to base security this week. Maybe next month we'll have something more suitable for your skill level. That night, Maria lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling and listening to the distant sound of helicopters, returning from missions she would never be assigned to. She thought about her father's words about proving herself through performance rather than complaints, but the constant rejections were taking their toll. She had excelled in every measurable aspect of her job, but none of it seemed to matter. Her size, her gender, and her relative inexperience in combat were apparently insurmountable obstacles in the eyes of her supervisors and peers. Unknown to Maria, Events were already in motion that would soon put her skills and determination to the ultimate test. Intelligence analysts were tracking increased activity in several sectors of the province, and special operations forces were planning missions that would require the kind of precision and reliability that she had been demonstrating all along. The war didn't care about personalities or prejudices. It only cared about results, and Maria Santos was about to get her chance to deliver them in ways that none of her critics could ignore. The emergency briefing was called at 21:30 hours on a Thursday night that started like any other. Maria had been cleaning her rifle in the armory when Corporal Davis burst through the door, still wearing his gear from a patrol that had returned just minutes earlier. "Santos, grab your kit," Davis said, breathing hard. "Murphy wants the entire section in the briefing room right now. Something big is happening." Maria quickly secured her weapon and equipment, then followed Davis through the maze of concrete barriers and sandbag walls that protected the base's interior facilities. The briefing room was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Maps covered every available surface. Radio operators were coordinating with multiple units, and the base commander himself was present, which only happened during major operations. Staff Sergeant Murphy stood at the front of the room next to a large topographical map of the region. His usual casual demeanor had been replaced by the focused intensity that Maria had only seen during the most serious training exercises. "Listen up," Murphy began as the last few soldiers filed into the room. At approximately 1900 hours today, a Navy SEAL team was inserted into Sector 7 for a high-value target elimination mission. They were supposed to complete their objective and be extracted by 2200 hours. He pointed to a location on the map marked with a red circle. At 20:30 hours, the SEAL team missed their scheduled check-in. A surveillance drone detected signs of a significant firefight in their area of operations. The extraction helicopter was forced to abort its pickup due to heavy ground fire. The room was completely silent. Everyone present understood the implications of what Murphy was describing. Somewhere in the mountains, elite American soldiers were fighting for their lives against unknown odds. Current intelligence suggests the SEAL team is pinned down in a defensive position approximately here, Murphy continued, indicating a small valley surrounded by steep ridges. Enemy forces have them surrounded and are preventing any rescue attempts. The terrain is too dangerous for helicopter insertion, and ground forces would take hours to reach them. Colonel Henderson, the base commander, stepped forward. "That's where we come in. We need to establish overwatch positions on the high ground surrounding that valley. Our mission is to neutralize enemy forces and provide cover for a ground rescue team that's being assembled right now." Maria felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of mission she had been hoping to participate in, but she also knew that Murphy would never select her for such a critical operation. "Sir," Murphy said, addressing the colonel, "with respect, this mission requires our most experienced teams. I recommend Johnson and Martinez for the primary overwatch position, Williams and Thompson for the secondary position." "Negative," the colonel replied firmly. "Johnson is laid up with food poisoning. Martinez sprained his ankle on today's patrol and Thompson is on leave. We need to work with who we have available." Murphy's expression showed his frustration with the personnel limitations. He looked around the room, mentally calculating his options. "In that case, I'll take Williams for the primary position. Davison—" He paused, clearly reluctant to say the next name. "Santos," the colonel finished for him. "She's qualified, she's available, and according to her file, she's one of your best marksmen. This isn't the time for personal preferences, Staff Sergeant." Maria tried to keep the excitement and nervousness off her face. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, but it was coming under the worst possible circumstances. Somewhere in those mountains, American soldiers were depending on people like her to bring them home alive. "Yes, sir," Murphy replied through gritted teeth. "Santos, grab your gear. We move out in 20 minutes. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Maria checked and rechecked her equipment, loaded her rifle with match-grade ammunition, and reviewed the mission details with Davis. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing with the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. The insertion was accomplished by helicopter under cover of darkness. Maria, Davis, Murphy, and Williams were dropped at a landing zone 5 kilometers from their target positions, then had to move cross-country through difficult terrain while carrying full combat loads. Maria's smaller size, which had been such a disadvantage during training, now proved beneficial. She was able to maintain the grueling pace with less effort than her larger companions, and her quieter movement through the rocky terrain helped the entire team avoid detection. Not bad. Tiny, Williams admitted grudgingly as they paused to rest after 2 hours of continuous movement. You're keeping up better than I expected. They reached their assigned positions just before dawn. Murphy and Williams established themselves on the western ridge overlooking the valley, while Maria and Davis took positions on the eastern side. The terrain was perfect for long-range shooting, with clear fields of fire and excellent concealment among the rocks and sparse vegetation. Through her scope, Maria could see the SEAL team's position in the valley below. 4 soldiers were dug in behind what appeared to be the remains of an old stone building, surrounded by enemy forces that had taken advantage of the rocky terrain to establish multiple firing positions. Overwatch East in position, Maria reported through her radio. I count at least 12 enemy positions. Range varies from 400 to 800 meters. Copy that, East, came Murphy's reply. West has visual on 6 additional positions on this side. Wait for my signal before engaging. For the next hour, Maria and Davis conducted detailed surveillance of the enemy positions, mapping their locations and identifying the most dangerous threats to the trapped SEAL team. Maria's patience and attention to detail allowed her to spot several camouflage positions that would have been missed by a less careful observer. The rescue operation began at 0630 hours. A ground team of Rangers started their approach from the south, while the Overwatch teams prepared to engage the enemy forces that were preventing extraction. All stations, this is Rescue 6, came the voice of the ground team commander. We are beginning our approach. Overwatch teams are cleared to engage targets of opportunity. Maria had identified her first target minutes earlier, an enemy machine gunner, positioned on a rocky outcrop that dominated the approaches to the SEAL team's position. The shot was challenging, requiring precise calculation of range, wind, and elevation, but it was well within her capabilities. She controlled her breathing, settled her scope's crosshairs on the target, and gently squeezed the trigger. The bullet found its mark instantly, and the machine gun fell silent. Good shot, East, Murphy radioed, genuine surprise evident in his voice. Over the next 30 minutes, Maria methodically engaged target after target with mechanical precision. Her shooting was flawless, each round finding its intended mark and eliminating threats that were preventing the rescue team's advance. Davis provided excellent support, calling out new targets and confirming hits with professional efficiency. East, you have a spotter moving along the ridgeline at your 11 o'clock, Williams reported. Approximately 600 meters. Maria quickly acquired the target and engaged it successfully. The coordination between the Overwatch teams was seamless, with each position covering the others and maintaining constant pressure on the enemy forces. The tide of the battle began to turn, as the enemy realized they were being systematically eliminated by invisible marksmen. Some attempted to retreat, others tried to find cover, but Maria and the other snipers maintained relentless accuracy that prevented any organized resistance. Rescue 6, we have reached the friendlies, came the report from the ground team, preparing for extraction. Continue Overwatch until we reach the landing zone. The evacuation took another 20 minutes, with the Overwatch teams providing continuous cover as the Rangers escorted the wounded SEAL team members to safety. Maria's ammunition count was running low, but her accuracy never wavered. Every shot was placed exactly where it needed to be. All stations, extraction complete, the ground team finally reported. Outstanding work, everyone. Those boys are going home because of you. As they prepared to withdraw from their positions, Davis looked at Maria with something approaching awe. I've never seen shooting like that, he said quietly. You saved lives today. Maria was exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time since arriving in Afghanistan, she felt like she had truly proven herself. The mission had been a complete success, and her contribution had been undeniable. The real test, however, would come when they returned to base, and she had to face the people who had spent months doubting her abilities. The helicopter ride back to base was unusually quiet. Maria stared out the window at the Afghan landscape rolling past below, still processing what had happened during the rescue mission. The adrenaline was beginning to wear off, replaced by a deep exhaustion that seemed to seep into her bones. Across from her, Staff Sergeant Murphy sat with his head back against the cabin wall, his eyes closed. Williams was cleaning his rifle with mechanical precision, while Davis made notes in a small notebook that he always carried on missions. Nobody spoke during the 30-minute flight, but Maria could feel something had changed in the dynamic between them. When they landed at Forward Operating Base Chapman, word of the successful rescue had already spread throughout the compound. The SEAL team had been safely evacuated to a medical facility, and initial reports indicated that all 4 members would make full recoveries despite their injuries. Colonel Henderson was waiting for them at the landing pad, along with several other senior officers. His expression was serious but satisfied as he watched the sniper teams unload their equipment from the helicopter. "Outstanding work out there," the colonel said as they formed up in front of him. "I've already received preliminary reports from the ground team commander." He specifically mentioned the precision and effectiveness of the Overwatch support. Murphy stepped forward to deliver his after-action report, but the colonel raised his hand to stop him. "That can wait until tomorrow, Staff Sergeant. Right now, I want to hear from the individual team members about their observations and performance." Maria was surprised when the colonel turned to her first. "Sergeant Santos, you were in the Eastern Overwatch position. What's your assessment of the operation?" All eyes turned to Maria as she organized her thoughts. This was the first time a senior officer had directly solicited her tactical opinion, and she wanted to make sure her response was professional and complete. "Sir, the enemy forces were well positioned and disciplined," she began. "They had established interlocking fields of fire that would have made any ground assault extremely costly. The key to the mission's success was eliminating their heavy weapons positions first, then systematically reducing their ability to coordinate their defense." She continued with a detailed analysis of the enemy's defensive positions and the tactical decisions that had led to the successful outcome. The colonel listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated his respect for her observations. "How many confirmed eliminations did your position achieve?" the colonel asked. 7 confirmed, sir," Maria replied, "including 2 machine gun positions and 1 mortar team that was preparing to engage the rescue force." The colonel nodded approvingly. "And your ammunition expenditure?" 14 rounds total, sir. All hits were confirmed by my spotter." A murmur of impressed surprise passed through the group of officers. 14 shots, 7 eliminations, 0 misses. It was exactly the kind of surgical precision that elite military snipers were supposed to deliver, but rarely achieved under actual combat conditions. "Excellent work, Sergeant," the colonel said. "Staff Sergeant Murphy, I want a complete written report on my desk by 800 tomorrow, with special attention to individual performance metrics." As the group began to disperse, Williams approached Maria with an expression she had never seen on his face before. The usual smirk and casual hostility had been replaced by something that looked like genuine respect. "Santos," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. What you did out there today, I've never seen anything like it. You saved those SEALs and probably some of our guys too." Before Maria could respond, Williams continued, "I've been giving you a hard time since you got here, and I was wrong. You belong here as much as any of us, maybe more." Over the next few days, word of the rescue mission spread throughout the base. Details of Maria's performance became the subject of conversations in the dining facility, the recreation area, and anywhere soldiers gathered to talk. The story grew with each telling, but the core facts remained the same. The small female sniper had delivered flawless performance when it mattered most. Corporal Davis, who had been her spotter during the mission, became one of her most vocal supporters. "I've worked with a lot of snipers," he told anyone who would listen, "but I've never seen anyone who could read the wind and calculate shots like Santos. She's a natural." Even Staff Sergeant Murphy's attitude began to shift, though he was more subtle about it than the others. During the next section meeting, he assigned Maria to increasingly challenging missions, giving her opportunities to demonstrate her abilities in different tactical situations. "Santos, you're on Overwatch for the convoy escort mission tomorrow," Murphy announced during one briefing. "It's a high-threat route and I need someone I can count on." The phrase "someone I can count on" represented a fundamental change in how Murphy viewed Maria's capabilities. For months, she had been fighting to prove that she belonged in his unit. Now finally, she was being treated as an integral member of the team. The change in attitude extended beyond the sniper section. Other units on the base began requesting Maria specifically for missions that required precision shooting. Her reputation for accuracy and reliability spread throughout the forward operating base, earning her the kind of professional respect that she had been seeking since her arrival in Afghanistan. Lieutenant Colonel Watson, the base's operations officer, called Maria into his office 2 weeks after the rescue mission. His office was Spartan but functional, with maps covering most of the available wall space and a desk that was buried under operational reports and intelligence summaries. "Sergeant Santos," Watson began, "I've been reviewing your performance since arriving at Chapman, and I'm impressed with what I see. Your shooting scores are exceptional, your tactical knowledge is solid, and your performance under pressure has been outstanding." Maria maintained her military bearing, but internally she felt a surge of pride. Recognition from senior officers was rare and valuable in the military hierarchy. "Thank you, sir," she replied. "I'm recommending you for advancement to the Special Operations Support Activity," Watson continued. "It's a specialized unit that provides precision shooting support for our most sensitive missions. The selection process is extremely competitive, but I believe you have the skills and temperament to succeed." The Special Operations Support Activity was the pinnacle of military sniper operations, a unit that most soldiers could only dream of joining. The fact that Watson was recommending her represented validation that went far beyond anything she had experienced during her career. "I would be honored to be considered, sir," Maria said. "The process will take several months," Watson explained. "But in the meantime, I want you to continue developing your skills here. You'll be assigned to some of our most challenging missions, working directly with Special Operations Forces." As Maria left Watson's office, she reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed. 6 months earlier, she had been struggling to gain basic acceptance from her peers. Now she was being recommended for one of the military's most elite units. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been easy. Every step had required her to prove herself against skeptics who doubted her abilities based on her appearance, rather than her performance. But persistence and competence had eventually overcome prejudice and preconceptions. That evening, Maria called her father from one of the base's communication centers. The connection was scratchy and delayed, but his voice came through clearly enough for her to hear the pride in his words. "Mija, I always knew you had it in you," he said. "Your mother and I are so proud of what you've accomplished." "I couldn't have done it without what you taught me, Dad," Maria replied. "About persistence, about proving yourself through actions instead of words. You did that all by yourself," her father said. "I just taught you how to shoot. Everything else came from your own heart and determination." As she hung up the phone, Maria thought about the SEAL team members who were recovering in a hospital thousands of miles away. They would return to their families because she had been in the right place at the right time, with the right skills. That knowledge gave her a sense of purpose and satisfaction that transcended any personal recognition she might receive. The war in Afghanistan continued, bringing new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself. But Maria Santos was no longer fighting to earn acceptance from her peers. She was now focused on the bigger mission, using her exceptional abilities to protect American soldiers and complete the most critical operations in one of the world's most dangerous environments. The girl they had called Too Tiny had become exactly what her country needed her to be. 3 months later, Maria found herself in a situation that would have been unimaginable when she first arrived at Forward Operating Base Chapman. She was sitting in a secure briefing room with some of the most elite soldiers in the American military, planning an operation that could change the course of the war in their sector. The mission briefing was being conducted by Major Harrison, a soft-spoken special operations officer who commanded the respect of everyone in the room through competence rather than volume. The walls were covered with satellite photographs, terrain maps, and target folders marked with the highest classification levels. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began, "what I'm about to tell you does not leave this room. We have identified the location of Khalil Nazir, one of the most wanted terrorist leaders in this region. He's responsible for coordinating attacks that have killed dozens of American and coalition forces over the past 2 years." Maria studied the photographs and intelligence reports as Harrison continued his briefing. Nazir was scheduled to attend a meeting at a compound in a remote mountain valley, approximately 40 kilometers from their current location. The intelligence was solid, but the target would only be vulnerable for a narrow window of time. The compound is heavily defended and located in terrain that makes a direct assault extremely dangerous, Harrison explained. Our best option is a precision elimination from long range, followed by immediate extraction before enemy reinforcements can respond. He turned to Maria, who was the only sniper in the room despite her relatively junior rank. Sergeant Santos, you've been selected for this mission based on your demonstrated performance and specific skill set. This will be the longest shot ever attempted by anyone in our unit, approximately 1,200 meters under challenging environmental conditions. The distance was at the extreme edge of her rifle's effective range. But Maria had been practicing shots at that distance for weeks in preparation for exactly this type of mission. The mathematical calculations required for such a shot were complex, involving wind speed and direction at multiple altitudes, temperature, humidity, and the ballistic characteristics of her specific ammunition. What's the time window? Maria asked, studying the compound layout on the satellite photos. Approximately 10 minutes, Harrison replied. Nazir is expected to arrive at 1400 hours and depart by 1410. You'll have one shot, maybe two at most, before the target moves to a covered position. The team for the mission was small, but expertly selected. Master Sergeant Collins would serve as Maria's spotter, bringing 15 years of special operations experience to the assignment. Captain Rodriguez would command a four-man security team responsible for protecting the shooting position and covering their withdrawal. 2 days later, they were inserted by helicopter into the mountains under cover of darkness. The approach to their shooting position required a grueling 8-hour movement through some of the most difficult terrain Maria had ever encountered. The altitude was over 8,000 feet, making every step a struggle against the thin air and her heavy equipment load. Collins proved to be an exceptional spotter, with an intuitive understanding of long-range shooting that complemented Maria's technical skills perfectly. During their movement to the target area, he shared insights about reading environmental conditions that she had never learned in any training program. The wind is different at this altitude, Collins explained as they took a brief rest. It's more unpredictable and it can change direction without warning. You'll need to watch for visual indicators on the slopes across from our position. They reached their designated shooting position just before dawn, establishing themselves among a collection of large boulders that provided excellent concealment, while offering clear fields of fire toward the target compound. The position was perfect from a tactical standpoint, but it presented significant challenges for long-range shooting. Range to target is 1,180 meters, Collins reported after taking precise measurements with his laser rangefinder. Elevation difference is approximately 200 feet. Target below our position. Maria began the complex process of calculating her shot, taking into account every environmental factor that could affect the bullet's trajectory. The altitude affected air density, which changed the ballistic characteristics of her ammunition. The temperature was significantly cooler than at their base, which also influenced the calculations. Wind is variable, Collins observed, studying the terrain through his spotting scope. I'm seeing gusts from multiple directions. This is going to be tricky. For the next 6 hours, they maintained constant surveillance of the target compound, while Maria fine-tuned her shooting solution. She practiced her breathing exercises, checked and rechecked her equipment, and mentally rehearsed the shot sequence dozens of times. At 13:30 hours, vehicles began arriving at the compound. Through her rifle scope, Maria could see armed guards taking positions around the building while civilian-dressed individuals entered through the main door. The meeting was beginning exactly as intelligence had predicted. Multiple vehicles now on site, Collins reported through their radio. Security is tight, but we still have clear lines of sight to the primary target area. At 13:58 hours, a black sedan arrived at the compound's main entrance. Through her scope, Maria watched as a tall, bearded man emerged from the vehicle and walked quickly toward the building's entrance. Even at nearly 1,200 meters, his distinctive appearance matched the photographs she had studied. Target identified, Collins whispered. Khalil Nazir moving toward the building entrance. Maria's heart rate increased slightly, but her hands remained perfectly steady on her rifle. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the culmination of months of training and years of dedication to her craft. Wind is gusting from the southwest at approximately 15 miles per hour, Collins reported. Target is moving at a normal walking pace. Maria made final adjustments to her scope settings and settled into her shooting position. The target would be visible for only a few more seconds before disappearing into the building, possibly never to present such a clear opportunity again. "Target entering the doorway," Collins said urgently. "Take the shot." Maria controlled her breathing, placed her crosshairs precisely where her calculations indicated, and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle's recoil was familiar and comforting, a sensation she had experienced thousands of times during training and combat. "Hit," Collins confirmed immediately. "Target is down. Excellent shot." Through her scope, Maria could see the chaos that had erupted around the compound as guards rushed to assist their fallen leader. But Khalil Nazir was motionless, the victim of a perfectly placed shot that had traveled nearly 1,200 meters to find its mark. "All stations, this is Overwatch," Collins reported over their radio. "Mission complete. Target eliminated. Beginning withdrawal." The extraction went smoothly, with Captain Rodriguez's security team providing excellent cover as they moved away from their shooting position. Within minutes, they were far enough from the compound to avoid the inevitable search that would follow. As they made their way toward the extraction point, Collins looked at Maria with undisguised admiration. "That was one of the finest shots I've ever witnessed," he said. 1,200 meters in variable wind conditions, and you put it exactly where it needed to go." The helicopter ride back to base was celebratory but subdued. Everyone understood the significance of what they had accomplished. But they also knew that their success had come at the cost of a human life, regardless of how deserving the target might have been. Major Harrison was waiting for them when they landed, along with several intelligence officers who needed immediate debriefing about what they had observed at the compound. The mission had been a complete success, eliminating a high-value target who had been responsible for numerous attacks against American forces. "Outstanding work, everyone," Harrison said as they unloaded their equipment. "Sergeant Santos, that shot will be talked about for years. You've just set a new record for our unit." But for Maria, the satisfaction came not from setting records or earning recognition. It came from knowing that her skills had been used to protect American soldiers and disrupt terrorist operations that threatened innocent people. The girl who had been dismissed as too tiny had just completed one of the most challenging missions in modern military history. 2 years after the mission that eliminated Khalil Nazir, Sergeant First Class Maria Santos stood before a gathering of military dignitaries and fellow soldiers at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The ceremony was taking place in the base's main auditorium, with flags from every branch of the military displayed prominently behind the podium. General Patricia Morrison, the first female Army Chief of Staff, was presenting Maria with the Distinguished Service Cross, the military's second highest award for valor. The citation read in part, "For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy, while serving as a sniper with Special Operations Forces in Afghanistan." Maria's parents sat in the front row, her father wearing his old Marine dress uniform, and her mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. They had flown in from Texas for the ceremony, along with her younger brother who was now a freshman at Texas A&M University studying engineering. Sergeant Santos exemplifies the finest traditions of the United States Army, General Morrison said as she pinned the medal to Maria's dress uniform. "Her courage, skill, and dedication have saved countless American lives and advanced our mission in one of the world's most challenging environments." The audience applauded, but Maria found herself thinking about the soldiers who weren't there to receive recognition. The SEAL team members she had helped rescue, the Rangers who had provided security during her missions, and the countless support personnel who made operations like hers possible. Military success was always a team effort, regardless of who received the medals. After the ceremony, Maria was approached by a steady stream of well-wishers and fellow soldiers. Among them was Master Sergeant Collins, her former spotter, who had flown in from his current assignment in Germany to attend the ceremony. "You know," Collins said with a grin, "when I first heard they were assigning a small female sniper to our unit, I had my doubts. I figured you'd wash out within a month." "What changed your mind?" Maria asked, already knowing the answer. "That 1,200-meter shot on Nazir," Collins replied immediately. "I've worked with a lot of snipers over the years, but I've never seen anyone make calculations that complex under that kind of pressure. You didn't just get lucky. You made that shot because you're exceptional at what you do." Later that evening, at the reception following the ceremony, Maria found herself in conversation with Colonel Henderson, her former base commander from Afghanistan. He had been promoted and was now working at the Pentagon, but he had made a point of attending her award ceremony. "I have a proposition for you," Henderson said after they had exchanged pleasantries. "The Army is starting a new training program for precision shooters, and we need experienced instructors who can teach both the technical and tactical aspects of the job." Maria listened with interest as Henderson outlined the position. It would mean leaving active combat operations but staying involved in developing the next generation of military snipers. The assignment would be at Fort Benning, the same facility where she had struggled through her initial training years earlier. "You'd be teaching the same course that you graduated from," Henderson continued. "But with your experience and perspective, you could help make sure that future students are evaluated based on their abilities rather than their appearance." The irony wasn't lost on Maria. Returning to Fort Benning as an instructor would complete a circle that had begun with her being dismissed as too tiny to succeed in the sniper program. Now she would be in a position to ensure that other students weren't subjected to the same prejudices and assumptions that had nearly derailed her own career. "I'm interested," Maria said. "When would this assignment begin?" 6 months from now," Henderson replied. "That would give you time to complete your current obligations and transition to the new role." 3 weeks later, Maria received news that made the decision even easier. She was pregnant with her first child, the result of her recent marriage to Captain David Chen, a helicopter pilot she had met during her second deployment to Afghanistan. The timing couldn't have been better for a transition to a less dangerous assignment. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Maria completed her final missions in Afghanistan, said goodbye to the soldiers who had become her family, and prepared for the transition to civilian life and motherhood. Her pregnancy progressed normally, and she gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Sophia. When Maria returned to Fort Benning as an instructor 9 months later, she found that her reputation had preceded her. The students in her first class looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. They had all heard stories about the small female sniper who had set records and saved lives in Afghanistan. "My name is Sergeant First Class Santos," Maria said as she addressed her first class of sniper candidates. "I know what some of you are thinking. You're wondering how someone my size ended up teaching this course." She paused, looking at each student individually. The class was diverse, including both men and women of various backgrounds and physical characteristics. But Maria could already see the same skeptical expression she remembered from her own training. "Let me tell you something about being a successful sniper," she continued. "It's not about how tall you are, how much you weigh, or what you look like. It's about discipline, patience, technical knowledge, and the ability to perform under pressure when lives are on the line." Over the following weeks, Maria worked with each student individually, helping them develop their skills while also changing their perspectives about what made an effective military sniper. She shared stories from her combat experience, demonstrated advanced shooting techniques, and most importantly, created an environment where students were evaluated based on their performance rather than their preconceptions. One of her students, Private Johnson, was a young woman from Montana who reminded Maria of herself during her early training. Johnson was smaller than most of her classmates and had to endure similar comments about her suitability for the sniper program. "Don't let them get to you," Maria advised during a private conversation after one particularly difficult training day. "Use their doubts as motivation. Every time someone says you can't do something, prove them wrong with your performance." Johnson took the advice to heart, eventually graduating at the top of her class and earning assignment to an elite unit. Years later, she would send Maria updates from her deployments, describing successful missions and thanking her former instructor for the encouragement that had kept her going. Maria's influence extended beyond individual students. Her presence at Fort Benning helped change the culture of the sniper training program, making it more inclusive and focused on actual performance rather than physical stereotypes. The graduation rates for female students increased significantly during her tenure, and the overall quality of training improved as well. 5 years after beginning her instructor assignment, Maria was promoted to Master Sergeant and given responsibility for the entire sniper training program. Her office walls were covered with photographs and letters from former students who were serving around the world, using the skills and confidence she had helped them develop. On quiet evenings at home with her family, which now included 2 children, Maria would sometimes reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. The girl who had been called too tiny had not only succeeded in one of the military's most demanding specialties, but had helped reshape how that specialty was taught and practiced. Her father, now in his 70s, would visit regularly and beam with pride as he watched his daughter work with her students. "You've done more than just prove them wrong, Mija," he would say. "You've changed the whole system for the better." As Maria looked toward the future, she knew that her most important legacy wouldn't be the records she had set or the medals she had earned. It would be the soldiers she had trained and mentored, who would carry forward the lesson that capability mattered more than appearance, and that determination could overcome any obstacle. The story of Maria Santos had become more than just one woman's triumph over prejudice. It had become proof that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that the military strength came not from conformity, but from the diverse talents of all who served.